Rayla is the one character who we do not see in the promotional material for Season 4 of The Dragon Prince. This is a deliberate choice to withhold her appearance, considering that she abandoned Callum in the graphic novel Through the Moon, which takes place after Season 3 and before Season 4. Rayla's absence is deeply felt in this show, considering how integral she was, not just to the grandiose, heroic battle sequences, but more importantly, Rayla was essential to the emotional and artistic core of this show. The relationship between her and Callum marked a beacon of hope in a desolate and uncertain world. In a time of great unease and unrest, when all sources of continuity and community have been taken for granted, and meaning is hard to come by, and identity is constantly in flux, these two are able to find each other, to support each other, to care deeply about each other's well-being, and shine a path for what the future of the world could look like. The loss of that is immense, both psychologically for Callum and thematically for the show. I thought at first that the show might minimize Rayla's disappearance, have it be consigned to the first few episodes after Through the Moon, to validate what happened in Through the Moon, but still bring us back to the status quo. Instead, what the show is doing is significantly more interesting. It is emphasizing the importance of Rayla's disappearance. It is making that disappearance and the debilitating, deracinating consequences of that central to what the show is going to explore going forward. Now, I must say that I am skeptical about the show taking this route, considering that the vast majority of the ordinary people who are watching this show probably have not read Through the Moon and will not read Through the Moon. For them, Rayla's disappearance is going to feel abrupt. It is going to feel like a radical departure from the show we have been watching for the last 3 seasons. Still, I'm interested in how the show is going to work Rayla's departure into the fabric of the conflicts and tensions that make up Season 4. The struggles both characters will face in Season 4 is directly linked to the degradation and decomposition of this relationship. They're both left unmoored. Callum is still not over Rayla. He still cares about her. And that fact makes the pain in his heart not have grown any lesser. He's desperate. He's still holding on to the memories he has of her. And because of this, he's vulnerable. And Erebos might take advantage of that vulnerability. For Rayla, her decision to leave Callum represents a step backward for her character. It represents her reverting back to the person she was earlier, the person who is willing to monomaniacally, obsessively commit herself to a single clear goal to provide herself a sense of certainty and a sense of security that she otherwise does not have. This path, while understandable, especially considering Rayla's past as depicted in Blood Moon Huntress, is quite far from being the best thing that she could do. It prevents her and precludes her from moving forward, from truly healing and becoming willing to form organic, beneficial relationships with others, relationships in which everyone communicates, and Rayla can think more broadly and comprehensively about what is best, not only for her, but for those who care about her, instead of blindly following a caprice that she says is to benefit others, but ends up hurting these others, hurting Callum and hurting her too. It leaves her alone and isolated. As to how the show has treated this relationship before the start of Season 4, we have gotten a few snippets of the current abject state of disrepair that their bond is in. The first of these was a while back. It was a short story called Inheritance. The surface of the story, its basic plot, is quite simple. Callum is taking over for Viren. He has to clean up a lot of Viren's arcane machinations in order to prepare the chamber for occupation by him, the new Dark Mage. While doing so, he finds the mirror of Erebos, and the story ends quite ominously, even though nothing explicitly inauspicious happens. What the story is really about, though, is Callum's denial about what happened with Rayla. She is left not so soon before the story takes place, and he's still smarting from that. The wound is still fresh. He's desperately trying not to think about her, and he is failing at this. The mirror is positioned right at the end of the story to demonstrate how Erebos might be able to take advantage of Callum's uncertainty, take advantage of his anxiety about his own future and about his relationship with Rayla, perhaps offer him superficially appealing answers that lead Callum to side more with Erebos, and thus go down a dark path. There are a few other hints we've gotten about the current state of this relationship, but they hardly paint it in a more positive light. There is a little clip, Moonlight, that we got of Season 4, where Ezrin asks Callum if he misses Rayla still, and while Callum does not explicitly confirm that he does, that he still desperately cares about her and hopes that she'll come back, even though the probability that she will return to him at this point is quite low from his vantage point. The fact that Callum does not want to talk about Rayla even this many years after she has left him demonstrates how poignantly he still misses her and still cares about her and still wants answers that he might never receive, that Rayla might not be able to give him even were she there with him. I will say that this scene is a little weird for completely unrelated reasons. Ezrin is significantly older here and looks quite a bit like Harrow, and yet he still has the same voice. Still, this clip is important to remember as we consider the final piece of information we have gotten regarding the current state of the Rayla and Callum relationship, which is the letter that Rayla wrote to Callum. In this letter, Rayla tries desperately to explain her reasons for leaving. She comes off as trying desperately not just to convince him, but to convince herself that she's making the right choice. The illustration at the end of the short story, which is just the text of the letter, is Callum looking despondent and crestfallen, and Ezrin trying to comfort him. Based on the illustrations, this seems to have taken place right after the ending of Through the Moon when Rayla leaves. I do have some problems with the letter itself from an artistic point of view. While it is not T.S. Eliot, it nonetheless uses a few lofty and poetic phrases that seem a bit dissonant from the person we know Rayla to be. She is writing this letter in a time of despair and uncertainty, and even in the best of times, she is not particularly gifted with words, nor is she the most expressive person. I understand why one might not think that Rayla's elevated eloquence in this letter is the biggest problem in the world, but it did strike me as a little strange and a little off-putting. Nonetheless, the letter is good in that it demonstrates the after effects of the psychological training and conditioning that she receives in Blood Moon Huntress. She comes to embrace the ideal of being an assassin largely as an escape from her grief and her feelings of impotence about her parents leaving her. This idea that violence, that this commitment to duty and abstract idealism is the way to respond to stressful and debilitating circumstances has stayed with Rayla, and it is going to take her a long time for her to try and move beyond this misconception. I want to pivot to discussing Callum, who is experiencing melancholy in the way that Freud describes it, which is a kind of extended mourning. Typically, Freud says, in the grieving process, we gradually, if erratically, detach the part of ourselves that was connected to the object of our affections, and we're able to attach it to the world of experience, the world in which we live and breathe. With melancholy, however, that reassociation never occurs. The parts of ourselves that were connected to the lost person, and for the record, this loss can be death, but it can also be someone who left us, or it doesn't even have to be a person. It can be a passion, a hobby, an ambition, an old image of yourself, an old conception of community. This lost object remains tied to this sense of yourself, and so you internalize that sense of loss. The shadow of that grief falls upon the ego, falls upon your basic conscious and subconscious conception of yourself. The basic cohesion of the self breaks down. All relationality to the outside world becomes blurred. The figure experiencing melancholy becomes trapped in their own insularity, their own attachment to the lost object of affection. They become trapped in their own despair. Callum deeply loves Rayla, and this is commendable, but the extent to which he is still holding out for her, even when he receives no indication that she will ever be back, does not speak well of him, and it opens himself up to being exploited by the cynical and scheming Erebos. Erebos promises him the unity and restfulness of mind and spirit that he seeks, and Callum might fall for that trap. So thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can, and you want to see more videos like this. Keep watching The Dragon Prince. But anyway, tune in soon for the next analysis. We'll be coming soon. I promise you that. Thank you all again. Adios, comrades.